Okay, so all right, well, I might get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today. As you would have seen, the topic of this meeting is advocating for what you want and need in the tuck shop. And QOS does a member and non-member survey every year to find out what our target audience, tuck shop conveners and P&Cs, really want to hear from us. And we ask the question, we give a list of different options of things that might help you do your job better and might help you achieve your goals in the coming 12 months. And working with the school community and working with the P&C was quite high on the response list for this year. So that's why we chose that topic for today. So that's going to be the main part of the presentation. And so I will be showing a presentation today. So yeah, as I said, welcome to the Queensland Association of School Tuckshops third Tuckshop Network meeting for 2024. We deliver these meetings in partnership with Health and Wellbeing Queensland. They provide funding for the Healthier Tuckshop Support Program. So these Tuckshop Network meetings are part of that program. And the idea of these meetings really is to get the message out about healthy tuckshops. And they're not always about healthy menus. A lot of them, we set the topics to be really about sort of challenging those barriers that tuck shops come across in relation to delivering a healthy menu. So, that capacity building we're trying to do with people who work in tuck shops to be able to have that healthy menu, because as we know, there's lots and lots of barriers to that. So anything that we can do to help address some of those barriers, we will do for the tuck shop conveners and P&Cs out there. So the topic today, advocating for what you want and need in the tuck shop. And the main sort of crux of this meeting is really around how to make sure that your tuck shop is an efficient and effective food service operation by looking at how you're working with your stakeholders, your communication, and all of the structure around how the tuck shops run. So everyone knows what to expect and everyone knows what the lines of communication are and that kind of thing. So we'll get to that soon. I'll just do an acknowledgement of country. QOS would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands across Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We recognise that Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islander peoples each have their own languages, beliefs, cultural practices, traditions and diversity within each culture. Just to introduce myself, I am the Chief Executive Officer here at QOS, and I'm also a project officer. I deliver the Healthy Tuck Shop Support Program. I also deliver a lot of the QOS member services. So never a dull moment in this role. My background is that I'm a trained dietitian many, many years ago, working in public health more recently in the last decade or so. I identify as a public health nutritionist, and I'm very, very passionate and motivated around healthy food and drinks in all settings for adults and children, but particularly for children in schools particularly. So you can see my contact details on the screen there. Please feel free to call me, text me, email me anytime. But do remember that we're a very small team here at QOS. We have basically 3 staff members, and 2 of those staff members are part-time. I'm the only full-time staff member. So if there's a bit of a lag to any of us responding to any of your inquiries, that will be why, because we just have very small capacity. Okay, so just an overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'll just give you a little bit of an update from QOS and just go through the training that we've got coming up for tuck shop conveners and P&Cs. And then the main part of the meeting, I'll just go through the main different tuck shop management models that exist in Queensland at the moment, run through a bit of lay a bit of groundwork about what the purpose is for the tuck shop, because often these communication issues that happen within the tuck shop is because of cross purposes around what the tuck shop is there for. So, and I'll be asking for a little bit of input from those online as well around, what you think and what your P&C or your school thinks the purpose of your tuck shop is. The role of policies and procedures, and people tend to, go a bit vague when you talk about policies and procedures, and it can be a very boring topic, but it is a very important underpinning structure for the tuck shop if you want to run an effective operation there. Working with stakeholders, there is a very long list of stakeholders that tuck shops need to work with to do the very best job that they can. So we'll just go through the list of those, and I'll just talk a little bit about how to work with stakeholders to make your jobs a little bit easier. Go through principles of best practice communication in the school and tuck shop setting, and then hopefully there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions and discussions. And really, I'm happy for anyone online to ask questions at any point. That's what we're here for. It's all about learning, and not just learning from me. It's not a one-way communication. I'm happy for you to volunteer any information or knowledge that you have, and also to work across with each other as well. So please feel free to bring anything up. Oh, somebody's just told me I need to click on the use slideshow. Okay, let me just, I'm going to stop the share. Start again. Is that one better? Is that a bit bigger?
Oh, bigger, yeah.
Yeah, that's
yep. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I just didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, as I said, anyone is free to interrupt me at any point. These are very informal, even though I do tend to take a very formal approach to a lot of things I do. I am very happy for anyone to speak up if they've got any questions or concerns throughout. So that's no problem at all. Okay, so a little bit of an update from Quast. I hope that everyone online has seen our Talking Tuck Shops digital magazine that we sent out in mid-February. If you didn't see that, it is on our website, so under our news tab. So it's a pretty big publication. I think it's about 24 pages long. So make sure you've got a bit of time, or just read a little bit now and go back to it. We also have, not quite so new now, a new trainer in Karen O'Neill. She's delivering our food safety supervisor course. So Karen comes from a background of university. We've just had, oh, there. And she has a bit of a nutrition background as well. So she does a really wonderful job delivering our food safety supervisor courses. So if you haven't updated your qualification recently, and you're going to be doing that in the next little while, then hopefully you'll meet Karen as well. And another exciting thing that's happening this week is that myself and the Quast president, Madonna, who is the co-convener, or the convener actually, at Cavendish Road State High School, we're meeting with the Minister for Education on Friday to advocate for school tuck shops, which is what we're talking about in this meeting. So there's lots of topics on our agenda to talk to the Minister about, but really it's about, you know, raising the profile of the hard work that tuck shops do every day, our children across the state, and the real importance of the food that's going into those children from the tuck shops. Really important for that food to be complementing and supporting their learning in a school environment. So, you know, obviously healthy diets are the most important ways that the tuck shop can benefit academic outcomes for the students. So that's one of the things that we'll be talking about with the Minister. Upcoming training. So we've got a food safety supervisor course being run tomorrow here in the office face-to-face. Then we have the next two after that are both online. So the 19th of March and the 12th of April. And as far as I know, there's still a few places available for those. If those dates don't suit, then we do have an expression of interest function on our website. On the main page down the bottom to the left, there's an EOI form for training. So if you are interested in doing some training, then you just need to fill one of those forms out, and we keep all of those on our record. And then when we book in another course, then we contact everyone on that list to let them know that the course is available. Convener course, that we've got pupil-free days, Thursday and Friday, the last 2 days of the April school holidays, the Easter school holidays. The convener course is full, but I think we've got a couple of places for the Pathway to Profit course. They're both face-to-face in the office as well. And we do have an expression. Sorry?
Where are they held, the Pathway to Profit?
They're held, the face-to-face ones are held at our office in Cooperoo. But we also offer those for, online, and we're just waiting until we have enough interest in the online courses to be able to offer those online. So if it's something that you would like to do, then complete one of those forms, and we'll let you know when we've got one coming up. Okay, so I just wanted to give, I guess, a bit of an overview of how tuck shops are managed in Queensland currently. And, you know, by far and away, the most common or popular model for tuck shop management is the traditional model, where the tuck shop is managed as a commercial activity by the P&C. The staff in the tuck shop are employed under the P&C award. This model traditionally has always relied on volunteers, and in fact some tuck shops are only run with volunteers, and you know, it's much more rare these days to have no paid staff, but there's still plenty of tuck shops out there that really just rely on the volunteer workforce. And the school administration may or may not be involved with what's happening in the tuck shop. I was speaking to someone, I think on Friday, who works in and out of the school sector, and they said, there's two rules for the principal: don't mess with uniforms and don't mess with the tuck shop. And that's not something that we really advocate for. We would like principals to be much more involved in what's happening in the tuck shop, because it has an effect on the student learning. So it's really important for principals to know what's happening in the tuck shop and make sure that, you know, everything is working well there. The other model, which is less common, but we are as an organisation seeing or fielding inquiries from schools that actually are starting to take over tuck shops a little bit more. So if the P&C is unable to run the tuck shop, they do need to surrender the running of the tuck shop to the school, to the business administration, the principal in the school, and then the school can take on the management of that. And if you're working in a non-government school, that's usually the model that is used in those schools where the tuck shop is actually run by the diocese or the school administration. And in that case, the principal oversees the main operation, and the business manager is the sort of commercial, the financial, takes financial oversight of the tuck shop. In those cases, some P&Cs will be quite involved with the tuck shop operation despite not running it, or some might be completely hands-off with that. And then the third most common model, and this is less common, but we are seeing again a little bit more of this happening, if the P&C can't run the tuck shop anymore, and if the school doesn't want to take the tuck shop on as a business, then the principal can either choose to close the tuck shop down, or they can outsource it to a third-party provider to come in and lease the tuck shop space and run it as a commercial business for themselves. And usually those third-party providers will enter into a bit of a profit share model with the school. But unfortunately, in that model, the school and the P&C has limited input into how the tuck shop is run, and particularly over the menu. So, you know, we see quite often when a third-party provider comes in that the menu options become a lot less healthy than what they could be, because, you know, those third-party operators are really looking to have as big of a margin as possible. So look for, you know, the cheapest sort of operation that they can get away with. So we don't love it when tuck shops are outsourced, because it really takes that decision making away from the school, and also any profit that the tuck shop makes doesn't go back into the school environment at all. Sorry?
More expensive for parents as well.
Yes, that's right. Yep, because they're always looking to increase their profit margins, and they're thinking less about, you know, equity of access for the tuck shop. They're thinking more about running it as a business. So yeah, it's like I say, not our preferred model, but unfortunately, if a school and the P&C are unable to run the tuck shop and you still want students to have that option in the school, then unfortunately that's the way some have to go. So I just wanted to work through what the purpose of a tuck shop is, because as I said at the beginning, there's often a lack of common understanding about why the tuck shop operates in the school environment. So I think it's always really good to go back and just really think about what the purpose of the tuck shop is, and make sure that there's agreement across everyone who's involved with a tuck shop that is the purpose. And, you know, there's a few guidelines, I guess, available around that. The first one is the Department of Education has a particular view about the purpose of the tuck shop, and that is that it is to provide a cost-effective service to the parents and students in the school community. And that's not just the tuck shop, that's all commercial activities. So that would be the uniform shop, if there's a stationery service as well, and outside school hours care. So all of those commercial activities, from the Department of Education's perspective, the main purpose is to provide a cost-effective service to parents and schools and students, sorry. The department also states that it is important for all of these commercial activities to break even or to make enough of a profit to cover the costs of operation. So making sure that they're covering wages, they're covering staff entitlements and cost of goods sold, any other business costs related, like work cover and insurance, and also for equipment maintenance and if equipment breaks down. So, there is a bit of a thought or understanding out there that tuck shops should not be making profit. And, really we don't want them to be making profit like, Woolworths or Coles or those kinds of entities. But we do have to understand how much it costs to run a business, and that the tuck shop should be making enough profit to be at least covering all of the costs associated. And that includes, when your equipment breaks down or you need to upgrade, that you don't, if you are maintaining a certain amount of profit over a number of years, then you can afford to reinvest into the tuck shop facilities, equipment, etc. If you're not making that profit and something breaks down, then you really are, looking for grant opportunities or pushing the P&C to do fundraising activities to be able to cover that. And if there's an option for the tuck shop to be making a small profit over time, then you can plan for those sorts of things ahead of time. And then, as the Department of Education says, the tuck shop can be operated either by the school or the P&C. So that's what the department says about tuck shops. P&C's Queensland, in their P&C guide, also talk about what the purpose of the tuck shop is. And it's, again, to provide an important service to the school community. And happily, P&C's Queensland talk about tuck shops being a place that promote healthy eating habits for children, a place that provides a variety of nutritious and attractively presented foods and drinks at reasonable prices. And again, there's that emphasis on operating at a reasonable profit, bringing income to the P&C and creating benefit for the school and in turn each child. So when the tuck shop, if the tuck shop is the only P&C commercial activity, and if the P&C doesn't have a huge parent membership that can engage in a lot of fundraising activities, the tuck shop might be the only way that the school, that the P&C can contribute back to the school. So again, profit isn't a dirty word in tuck shops, but getting a balance between how much the prices are compared to covering costs and making that profit is an individual decision for each school or each P&C, depending on who's running the tuck shop. So they're the purposes that I have found from looking at documents and working with P&C's Queensland and Department of Education. I just wanted to check if anyone online had any other thoughts about what the purpose of the tuck shop is in your school or overall. Has anyone got any sort of ideas in that space? No? All right, well, I've got another one. And this one isn't really mentioned in the P&C's guide or the Department of Education documentation, but because I'm a public health nutritionist by background and I'm passionate about the role of tuck shops in contributing to nutrition and health outcomes for Queensland children, that's one of my sort of, I guess, positions around the purpose of the tuck shop, is that it's contributing to nutritional outcomes for Queensland children. Queensland children, just like all other Australian children and children in all countries, particularly developed countries, they're exposed to lots of unhealthy foods and drinks everywhere they go these days. They finish school, go to swim club on a Friday. There's usually lots of unhealthy foods and drinks there. They go to Bunnings with their dad on a Saturday morning and there's a sausage sizzle, and then they'll go out for a family meal and the children's menu is nuggets and chips, and they'll stop at a service station and fill the car up with petrol and go in and grab some Slurpees, for example. So there's lots of places that kids can access unhealthy foods and drinks. And so the tuck shop to me is a safe, could be or should be a safe space where children are able to access healthy foods and drinks that support their learning. So, you know, P&C's Queensland does also agree with that in terms of it's a place to model healthy foods and drinks for children. Anyone else have any other sort of ideas about the purpose of a tuck shop? Another one might be, particularly tuck shops that are still doing cash over-the-counter service, is helping to develop and give the students the opportunity to have a bit of independence and learn about cash, even though we're probably increasingly moving towards a cash-free society. Just building that independence for children to be able to go up to a counter and make an order and hand over some money and get something in return. Just that, you know, that building the independence is having a little shop in a school. People who don't come from Australia are often surprised that there are these shops in schools, because it's you know, it's a fairly unique system that we have in Australia, where there is a canteen or a tuck shop in almost every school. In a lot of countries, they don't exist like that. So, you know, I think that's a really great purpose for a tuck shop, is for, you know, developing that independence for students as well. So now moving on to, where do you start in terms of working with the school community, leading in the tuck shop space, working, you know, identifying who your stakeholders are and how to work with them better, and also how to communicate in a best practice way. And all of those things are really pointing towards having an efficient and effective tuck shop operation where everyone knows what everyone is supposed to do, everyone's agreeing on the purpose of the tuck shop, and everyone's agreeing on how the tuck shop is running. And that doesn't just happen naturally. There's a lot of groundwork that can be done or needs to be done to make sure that everyone understands what the purpose of the tuck shop is, all of the stakeholders understand what their role is, and everyone communicates really well. So the next few slides are going to be talking through all of the different elements of tuck shop operation to make sure that everyone communicates well and everyone understands how the tuck shop is supposed to be running. So I mentioned that I would talk a little bit about tuck shop policies and procedures. So again, referring back to the P&C guide, P&C guide contains a bit of information about how commercial businesses should be run in the school environment. So whether it's the tuck shop, uniform shop, outside school hours care, there should be an overarching HR policy which has clear information about the roles and responsibilities of the P&C executive officers, the employees that are employed by the P&C, and volunteers that are working in the businesses as well. So for all of those different positions and roles within the P&C operated activities, or even if it's a school operated activities, all of those different roles should have position descriptions that describe what the tasks are and, you know, what functions each of those roles have, and ideally have some sort of performance planning and review in place, particularly for employed members of the team. So position description, setting up performance planning and review meetings perhaps once a year to really sit down and look at your position description and identify where you're doing well, areas to improve, and importantly, a way to identify if you're needing help to perform in some of the areas against your position description, that you can access training to be able to improve your performance. So that's very clear in the P&C guide. Also, all business operations within a school environment should have a workplace health and safety policy. And, you know, if there's ever any disagreements over, you know, what are the health and safety practices within the tuck shop environment, that's where you would refer to make sure that everyone knows what their obligations are, what their responsibilities are. Again, documented process reporting and recording incidences. There's a lot of near misses that happen that, you know, potentially aren't recorded, and if you don't record a near miss, then it's more likely to become an accident or incident in the near future. So having a documented process for that. And then in the P&C guide, it also talks about making sure that there is a procedure that's documented. So all of the businesses that are run, including the tuck shop, is able to run in the absence of the convener or the manager of that business. So that's really important. As we know, if there is staff employed in the tuck shop, particularly for schools of, say, 400, 500 or less students, you'll probably only have one person who is paid to work in that tuck shop. And, people are not machines and people get sick. And it's really important to be able to have a procedure documented so the tuck shop can run in the absence of that one person, so that they're not indispensable to the operation of the tuck shop. So on top of all of those overarching policies and procedures, we're also looking at what policies and procedures need to be in place within the tuck shop specific commercial activity. Lots of different elements of running a tuck shop, as you all know. Menu planning can be very controversial. So having a policy that sets out exactly the process that you use to make changes to the menu, to make updates to the menu, the purpose of the menu, what you're trying to achieve with your menu, all of those sorts of things should be documented in a menu planning policy. And that way, if there's ever any disagreement about the menu, you go back to the policy, and that will help, calm down any of those disagreements or controversies or emotions related to that. Similarly, pricing on the menu. So there should be a pricing policy, an agreement of how the pricing is implemented on the menu, and also how your pricing is responding to the needs of your school community. So if you're in a tuck shop in a low socioeconomic area, then you would put in your pricing that you do absolutely everything that you can to keep those prices low, to make sure that there's equity of access for the whole school community. And again, pricing can get really controversial and very emotional. So having an agreement and that written, documented in a policy is a great way to reduce angst and controversy within the tuck shop environment. Purchasing and ordering, a policy and also a procedure, and that goes back to if the tuck shop convener is unwell for any reason, having all of those processes documented, who your suppliers are, your policy around reviewing suppliers regularly, and the procedure for actually making orders. Really important to have all of that written down as well. Food safety is another one that we see quite regularly. Cost as an organisation, there's often disagreements about whether people are doing the right thing around food safety. And obviously, it's really great if at least one person in the tuck shop environment has done the food safety supervisor course and has that qualification behind them. But also having, all of those food safety practices written down, documented, and even, extending that to a food safety plan, which isn't a requirement in state schools, but if you do have a food license, you do need, if you're in a non-government school, you should have a food safety plan. All of that documented so everyone knows, what you do around gloves, what you do around wearing jewelry, having nail polish in the tuck shop, what your dress code is. All of those sorts of things would go in your food safety policy and procedure. The next one is, and this sort of goes back to your pricing as well, having a financial review policy and procedure. So a lot of tuck shops that we go out to and visit, we do tuck shop tune-ups, which is a full audit of all of the elements of tuck shop operation. And that service is highly popular at the moment. We're getting a huge demand for tuck shop tune-ups. And one of the main reasons for a lot of schools is that the finances are in a mess. And that may be because they don't actually review the financial status of the tuck shop. They might just do it once a year, or they might do it at a different time each year. And, best practice is really to review the finances of the tuck shop at the end of each term, and compare it to last year and the year before, and keep those records tracking over time. And having all of that process set out in your financial review policy and procedure. And that way, again, you know what you're aiming for. You might be saying, we just want to make enough profit to cover all of the costs that I outlined earlier, or we want to make enough profit to contribute to the music program, or all of those sorts of things would be put into your financial review policy and procedure. So are there any other policies out there that people have in place, or procedures that you have in place that you think might be useful to mention here? Anybody online?
We have a policy about students helping in Tuckshop.
Yep,
some of
excellent.
the senior students come in. Yeah.
Yep, that's really important, because again, lots of people will have different ideas about whether that's allowed, and which students and what they're allowed to do. And instead of having miscommunication and confusion, having all of that set out in a policy is a really great way to cut off or circumvent any confusion and upset about that. Any others? No? Okay, well, I'll keep moving on then. So I just thought I would, again, as I say, we're doing lots of Tuckshop tune-ups in the last 12 to 18 months. And these are the common things that, I'm being asked about when I go into Tuckshops to do that, to offer that service. So one of the issues that's really, really common is confusion between Tuckshop staff and P&C executive over decision-making in the Tuckshop environment. So, who makes the decisions about the pricing? Who makes the decisions about which suppliers to use? Who makes the decisions about menus, etc.? So the overall covering policy for that would be your HR policy and your position descriptions for the executive members and for all of the staff and potentially your volunteers. And if all of that is outlined in those documents, then you go back to those documents as a starting point to help sort out any confusion and any disagreements about who makes decisions. The next one that's really common as well is confusion about who can direct staff in the Tuckshop. So, you'll have a P&C executive, and then you'll have P&C members, and you might have a Tuckshop subcommittee, and the Tuckshop convener is in the Tuckshop trying to do a really great job, and they're getting different messaging from different people in the P&C, for example. So that can cause a lot of confusion and a lot of angst. There might even be confusion within the Tuckshop, who is making the decisions, who can direct staff and volunteers within the Tuckshop. So again, going back to your HR policy and the position descriptions can really help to sort out any of that sort of confusion, and making sure that not just that you've got the documents, but everybody, all of the stakeholders involved, are aware of what's in those documents. The next one might be frustration about lack of quality of service or practice improvements. So quite often Cost will get asked to come and do a Tuckshop tune-up by a P&C, because the P&C has told their Tuckshop convener to do this, this and this, and they just won't do it. And so they get us to come in and be a third party, or an independent observer around that. So again, having all of the position descriptions very, very clear, and implementing that performance planning. And, performance planning doesn't need to be the supervisor down to the employee or the manager down to the employee. It's actually, as an employee, asking for the performance planning system to be implemented helps you to advocate on behalf of yourself and any other paid staff in the Tuckshop, and potentially even volunteers. It should be a 360 process where the staff are able to, raise any issues that they're finding around the supervision style or management style or confusion, etc. So really, really recommend to have a performance planning system in place for all staff. If there's concerns about profitability or confusion about whether the Tuckshop's making a profit or not, that financial review policy and procedure, and including in that policy who actually has oversight of whether the tuck shop is making a profit or making a loss, and making sure that everyone who needs to know all of that information does know all of that information. And the tuck shop convener should not be left out of those discussions around financial performance of the tuck shop, because they're the ones who are in there, and potentially they're making changes to the menu or changes to their operations to try and have a more efficient operation, or they might be going along thinking that everything's fine, and then all of a sudden they're told that they've made a $10,000 loss for the year, and what are they going to do about it? And if they weren't kept up to date with what's happening from a financial perspective, they have absolutely no power over being able to make changes to help reduce losses or to increase profit. Disagreements about menu changes. So as I've mentioned, menu can be quite an emotional topic. So having your menu planning policy that sets out how often you would review it, who gets involved with the reviewing, what you're trying to achieve with your menu, all of those things would be put in your menu planning policy and referred back to. And then discussions about increasing prices. And especially at this time, when cost of living is going up constantly and cost of ingredients and cost of supplies are all going up, when we talk to tuck shops, when we do those tuck shop tune-ups, we do suggest that they consider, tuck shops and PNCs do consider putting up the prices, because tuck shops cannot absorb all of those increases in costs for suppliers that are coming through. And if you start making a loss, you're getting into the situation if you're making a loss because your prices aren't keeping up with the cost of doing business, what you'll find is that there is a whole lot of pressure put on parents in the PNC to fundraise just to keep the tuck shop as a financial ongoing viability. So really important to be looking at your prices over time whilst you're reviewing your financials. So the pricing policy, financial review policy would be the documents that you're looking for there. And then concerns about food safety practices. So we talked about that before. Queries about students in tuck shops. So Sue, your comment about should students be in the tuck shop, that might be something that you would put in your overall tuck shop policy, or it could be, if you have a volunteer policy as well, you might pop that in there in terms of, what age they need to be or year level, what their responsibilities would be, how you manage consent from parents, how you make sure that the students are safe, all of those things would go in your tuck shop policy. So now I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. Moving on to working with stakeholders. And at the outset of this section, I really think this quote just describes working with stakeholders perfectly. You can please some of the people all of the time. You can please all of the people some of the time. But you can't please all of the people all of the time. And that's something that you really must remember. Tuck shop conveners tend to be real people pleasers because they are, very generous personalities. They do it for the love of it. They do it for the passion. They do it because they want to help. And it can be really difficult if you're one of those types of people and everybody is wanting something different from you and you cannot please everyone. So always think about that you're not going to be able to please all the people all the time. But what you can do is remember back to the purpose of your tuck shop and let that lead where you go with working with different stakeholders. I've just opened up the chat and had a look at some comments here. So somebody's mentioned year 6 only at lunchtime to serve slushy and ice creams. 5, 6 students help with breakfast club. And then someone's asked, what do you do when the BSM won't show you their figures, profit and loss, and say you've made a major loss? When I've done my figures, mine is very different. And what we say in that situation is that the tuck shop convener should be given some training and also, allowed to participate in those financial review procedures. And the best, and I'm not here to convert people to become course members or to access our training, but we do have our Pathway to Profit course, which we usually recommend that a PNC treasurer and a convener attend that course together, because then you're getting all of the same information at the same time. We provide examples and we have worksheets and templates that you can take back and use in your tuck shop. So what I would say is that, there is no point if you're a financial controller in an organisation and you've got people who are responsible for operation of the business and the business is losing money, you can't blame them if you're not involving them in the decision making. So that's what I would say, is to go back to the BSM and say, if you want me to run this tuck shop at a profit, then I need to understand how the finances work. All right, you've done that training. All right, that's good. Yeah, it can be tricky, and you could ask the BSM to give us a call, and we could talk them through all of those different elements of how tuck shop conveners really need to be involved in finances. All right, so tuck shop stakeholders, there are very many, and I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list, but obviously we have our P&C executives, and then we've got other general P&C members, parents and carers that are not part of the P&C but use the tuck shop on a regular basis. Students, they're probably the major stakeholder. Let's be honest, they're the customer, and they're the reason that tuck shops exist in the first place. Suppliers are an important stakeholder, other tuck shop staff, volunteers that come in, your school principal, especially if they're wanting to be involved. But even if they're not wanting to be involved in the tuck shop, they are the site manager of the school and they make the decisions, particularly, for example, around smart choices implementation. Other teaching staff may have an opinion or some influence around the tuck shop. Then you've got external providers that come in and run programs in the school that might have something to do with the tuck shop. P&Cs Queensland as your peak body for P&Cs and your insurer and your auditor. Are there any others, stakeholders that you guys work with regularly that I haven't got on that list there? Always keen to hear who else might be involved. Any others?
Should cost be on there?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yep, there we are. We're down here. There's our name. But yeah, we don't get involved in tuck shop operation unless we're invited to come in. But yeah, certainly we can be an important stakeholder if the school wants us there and the P&C wants us there, for sure. And we position ourselves as the advocate, the peak body for tuck shop conveners. So yeah, thank you for mentioning cost as a stakeholder. Any others? Jim, I can see you talking, but you're on mute. You're still on mute. No, still on mute. I'm not sure. Can I? I don't think. Nope. Now you're right. You can speak now. Oh no, your sound's still not coming through. Sorry, Jim. You could actually, if you could type it in the chat, I can read it out to the group. Sharon, were you going to say something? Nope. All right. Anyone else in the chat? Any other stakeholders?
Would it outside school hours?
Yeah, especially if they're using the tuck shop, or if the tuck shop convener or tuck shop staff are providing food. Yep, that's a good one. Outside school hours, because they will have, I guess, different requirements around their menu compared to what you're serving in the tuck shop. Yeah. And the use of the tuck shop is actually a really important issue, especially around when the P&C is running events in the school, for example, using the tuck shop. So yeah, outside school hours care, and I guess any other.
We also
P&C.
do.
Yep.
Yeah, we also do a breakfast club.
Of course, yep. So breakfast clubs, yeah. They're using up storage space in your fridge and, sometimes serving out of the tuck shops as well. And then sporting groups that come into the school using facilities. Yeah, thanks very much, Sarah, for that one. Yeah, so there's a lot of people to try and keep happy, and you're not going to keep everyone happy all of the time. So the next sort of thing to think about is, well, which are the most important stakeholders and who do we absolutely have to keep happy all of the time? And so this is a little graph, like whenever you work in any setting where you're working with lots of different people and different groups, they're all called stakeholders. And this graph is something that goes back many, many years, mainly in project management. And, you know, it really sort of talks about your stakeholders on a scale. And so on the left of that graph, you've got power. So those who have high power are at the top, and those who have low power at the bottom. And across the bottom is interest and, you know, potentially support of what you're doing in the tuck shop. And so you've got people that have low interest, don't care what you're doing and not going to support, or those that have really high interest. And so there's 4 quadrants there. So people who have low power, who aren't able to influence what's happening in the tuck shop and don't have a lot of interest. And, you know, that might be the principal that doesn't want to be involved. You monitor what the principal's thinking, but you're not really putting a lot of effort into, you know, developing a relationship with that stakeholder, whatever. The ones that have high power but low interest, you've got to make sure that they're staying informed and that they're happy that everything's going okay in the tuck shop. And that might be your business service manager, for example, if they're having a real hands-off approach to managing the tuck shop and just want to make sure that you're not losing money. You know, reporting to them regularly and letting them know that everything's going okay in the tuck shop might be a way to, you know, keep that stakeholder satisfied. That red box there, the stakeholders that have high power and high interest in what's happening in the tuck shop, and that might be your P&C president, for example, that's a stakeholder that you manage closely and actively influence. And so on that slide, you'll see there that there's a few different sort of recommendations around working with stakeholders. The first one is to understand the perspective of the different stakeholders that you're working with and what their motivators are for being involved with the tuck shop. So, you know, this is sort of like a stakeholder analysis. You're really thinking about, well, what do they want out of this? Why are they so interested? And, you know, what do I need to do to try and keep these people happy? And that leads into number 2 there, determining the priority or importance of that particular stakeholder support and how important it is to keep them happy. If there's someone, point number 4 is understand the potential impact of a poor relationship or really low support from that stakeholder. If it's really important to keep that stakeholder happy, then it's really important to develop a good relationship with them, because they can derail what you're doing, they can undermine what you're doing in the tuck shop. So, you know, quite often we see there's different factions that form in a school, in a P&C, or between the tuck shop and the P&C executive, and there's very little communication between the factions, and, you know, they disagree and they actively undermine each other. And the only thing that suffers, well, lots of things suffer in that situation, but what really suffers is the operation and the effectiveness of the tuck shop overall. So as much as it pains sometimes to try and work positively with a stakeholder that you have a poor relationship with and don't agree with their outlook, if they have influence in what you're doing in the tuck shop, you really need to try and develop a good relationship with those stakeholders to, again, make sure, you know, going back to the agreed purpose of the tuck shop, make sure that your tuck shop is able to fulfill its potential. So that's just a few, like some tips, I guess, around working with stakeholders. And like I say, sometimes it's really difficult, especially when there's very emotional, you know, issues going on. But stepping back and thinking about, well, why am I here? Why am I doing this job? What is the purpose of this tuck shop? Stepping back and thinking about that as a way to move forward. So on that topic, in terms of, you know, communicating with those stakeholders, from a tuck shop perspective, how you communicate with your P&C and with your very important stakeholders in a structured way will really set the groundwork for having an effective, efficient operation. So something that we always recommend when we do tuck shop tune-ups, and, you know, if we're taking inquiries about issues or controversies or disagreements that are happening in the tuck shop, is having regular meetings with clear communication is the best way to get in front of those issues and to try and, I guess, calm down some of that emotion and make sure that everyone gets to have their say. So those meetings are really important. And we would suggest at least once per term having meetings specifically talking about what's happening in the tuck shop. You might have a meeting with a set agenda. So you might talk about pricing each meeting. You might talk about the menu. You might talk about equipment in the tuck shop. You might talk about, that might be a time when you're talking about what training that you might want to be accessing. Another great structure, if your school community is big enough and your tuck shop is big enough to support it, is to have a tuck shop committee. And that's a really great way to get input from all of those different stakeholders. And it doesn't mean that you have to do everything all of those stakeholders ask you to do, but having a committee that has representatives from staff in the tuck shop, from someone from the P&C, potentially a staff member from the school, and that could be the principal, deputy principal, or someone from the admin team, or a teacher, and also a student is really a great way to get views from your customer base, which is your student population. So having a tuck shop committee, if people have the time and if the operation's big enough to support that, is a really great way to make sure that the tuck shop's ticking over and that the tuck shop is responding to the needs of the school community. Whether you have your regular tuck shop meetings or a committee, or whether the tuck shop convener attends or doesn't attend P&C meetings, having a regular tuck shop report, again, I would say minimum once per term, but even forwarding a report in a very structured way for the P&C meetings is a really great way to keep everyone across what's happening in the tuck shop. And Quast, one of our member resources, is a template for a tuck shop report. And I've mentioned it a few times, having a performance review system, a performance planning system in place for the tuck shop convener and their supervisor, which would probably most likely be the P&C president, is a really great way, again, to, if there's issues bubbling along under the surface, having regular meetings and having regular performance planning meetings is a way to bring those things to the surface before they explode and become really huge issues, which end up with, someone resigning from their role, for example, which is something nobody wants. So that's, they're probably the major elements of communication structures that a tuck shop can use to make sure that they're, keeping the peace across all of the stakeholders and having very clear communication in a structured way and covering all bases. If there is conflict arising, the Department of Education has their information sheet around managing conflict in the P&C, and there isn't actually any information that I could find about how to manage conflict between P&Cs and their employees. But I think the overall direction for this document is that all members of a school community have the right to be treated with respect. And so if conflict arises, and it says there within the P&C, between a P&C member and a member of the school community, or between a P&C and a school, and I would say, between employees of the P&C and the P&C executive, all parties have an obligation to try and resolve the situation in a respectful way for the benefit of the school and students. So always thinking back to that, everyone should be treated with respect, even if they've been out of line with the way they communicate or the tone in which they communicate, or some of these factions that form. Everyone has different motivations and different reasons for doing what they do and saying what they say. So trying to step back, take the emotion out of it as much as you can, and treating everyone with respect is a really great way to get started on resolving some of those communication issues. And we also have the Parent and Community Code of Conduct, which is the Department of Education document. There's lots to this document, but this is just one bit that I've snipped out of it. It is expected that parents and visitors to the school will be polite to others, act as positive role models, respect and recognise and respect personal differences, and use the school's communication process to address concerns. So, again, if there's real issues that have arisen around communication difficulties, referring back to that and making sure that everyone's behaviour and communication reflect what is expected to the against the Parent and Community Code of Conduct is a really great sort of reset, I guess, for everyone involved. And then finally, if all else fails and, you're unable to resolve issues that arise, you know, from an employment perspective or a performance perspective or anything like that, P&Cs Queensland has their HR support service. And, you know, there's lots of issues that they can address with that service. And Quost, as an organisation, it is actually in our constitution to not provide advice around HR issues. The furthest we go is what I've talked about today, which is to have, you know, performance planning in place and regular meetings and trying to keep lines of communication open. But if all of that fails, or if, you know, people are struggling to get to that point, then the HR support service for P&Cs Queensland is the best place to go for people if they need more support and more information. Obviously, that's a paid for service, but if you want to keep your staff or if you want to stay in your job, it costs way more to lose a staff member, advertise, recruit a new staff member and train a new staff member than it does to sort some of these issues out in the first place. So we would always recommend that P&Cs and Tuckshop conveners could approach P&Cs Queensland to get more advice through that HR support service. And that's all I had for you today. Oh, it's right on 3 o'clock. I didn't realise I'd been talking for quite so long. Are there any questions or other areas of discussion that anyone would like to raise at this point? Just have a look in the chat. Somebody's asked, what if you have a problem and the P&C tell you that they're not allowed to go to the principal, as then they're telling you you can't go to the principal? Yes, that is a tricky one, and it is correct that Tuckshop conveners, I mean, they can't go to the principal to raise concerns from an employment and HR perspective. But if those issues are affecting your ability to do your job and service the students and staff from a Tuckshop perspective, I think that's something that you would definitely talk to your P&C about, to say, well, I can't actually do my job, and, you know, the purpose of this Tuckshop is to serve healthy food for the school students, and that's really becoming really difficult in this situation. But yes, I'm not actually sure what P&Cs Queensland would say. So that's a question I'm going to send them, is what happens if the Tuckshop convener does want to go to the principal. Does anyone have any experience in that at all? No? Okay. All right. Well, that's something that I'm going to look up. Every day I learn something new or find out something that I don't know that I need to learn more about. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your attendance today. And as I said, this has been recorded, so it will be uploaded to our website. And if you needed to go back and have a look at anything, it will be there. So thanks everyone, and see you next time. Thanks for coming.